Before we start, please don't forget to like and subscribe. The door creaked open and in walked Rachel, shaking the rain from her coat like she was in a shampoo commercial, flawless, composed, and late. "Hey," she said breezily, dropping her purse onto the bench near the entryway. "You're up?" "Yeah," I replied from the kitchen doorway. "Couldn't sleep." She didn't look up, just started kicking off her heels. I stayed still, arms crossed. The overhead light cast a sharp glow, and that's when it hit me. That smell. Not perfume. Not shampoo. Cologne. Heavy. Masculine. And not mine. My eyes narrowed. "You were a new scent tonight?" I asked flatly. Rachel glanced up, blinked. "What?" "Oh no. That must be from the restroom. They had one of those automatic spray things. It was awful." I sprayed my hands to cover it up. "Huh," I said. "Because it smells a lot like Hugo Boss. Not citrus, not vanilla. Leather, musk, and regret." She laughed, but it was forced. "Thomas, seriously. It's just the air freshener." I took a step forward. "Which restaurant?" "Rose's. Off Lamar. Me, Laura, and Jasmine. We split a pitcher of margaritas, you know, girl talk, blah blah." "Jasmine." I tilted my head. I thought she moved to Denver last month. Rachel flinched, barely, but I saw it. "She's back. Visiting. For the weekend." She answered too fast. I nodded slowly, but my tone didn't shift. "You were gone for 4.5 hours. I checked the time." She placed her coat on the hook and tried to smile. "Are you interrogating me?" I met her eyes. "No, Rachel. I'm asking you what happened tonight. Because something doesn't add up." She rolled her eyes. "Seriously, Thomas? I go out for dinner with my friends, and now I'm on trial?" I didn't blink. "You came home smelling like another man. And you're giving me names that don't line up. Tell me what I'm supposed to think." Her jaw tensed. She pulled out her phone and waved it dramatically. "Fine. Want proof? I'll call Laura right now." She hit speaker and the phone rang. Twice. Then, "Hey, Ratch." Laura's voice was chipper, like she'd been expecting the call. "Can you tell Thomas where we ate tonight?" Rachel said, smiling tight. Laura didn't even pause. "Rose's on Lamar. That air freshener in the ladies' room is still terrible." Rachel arched her eyebrows at me, as if to say checkmate. But that's what told me everything. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. I nodded. "Thanks, Laura," I said into the speaker. "You two must have had a good time." "Oh yeah." Rachel was the life of the party. Rachel hung up and dropped her phone on the entry table like she'd just won a court case. "Happy now?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm convinced now. Just not in the way you want." She froze. "Excuse me." I took a step closer, voice steady, eyes locked on hers. "You smell like someone else. You rehearsed that call with Laura. And you think I'm the same man I was 2 years ago." "Thomas, don't, you lied." "I'm not yelling. I'm not accusing. I'm just telling you, whatever game this is, I'm not playing along." She didn't respond. And I didn't need her to. I walked past her, picked up the plate of food I'd reheated for her, and dropped it gently on the counter. "You hungry?" I asked. "Or did he buy you dinner too?" She stared at me, jaw clenched, and I swear, for the first time, I saw something crack behind her polished eyes. I didn't wait for an answer. I just walked upstairs. "I'm Thomas. 36. System analyst. Quiet observer. Live in a 2-story house on a cul-de-sac in Austin, Texas. Most people think I'm soft-spoken. And they're not wrong. But they mistake quiet for blind. Stillness for weakness. Tonight, I saw it clear. And now, I'm watching. And I'm done pretending." It was 2 weeks later, late Saturday morning. Rain had given way to sunshine, but something in the air still felt unsettled. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee from my favorite mug, white ceramic, chipped near the handle. My laptop was open, mostly ignored. I was flipping through an article I didn't care about when Rachel walked in. She was humming. That's when I knew she wanted something. "Morning," she said brightly, pouring herself orange juice like the last 2 weeks hadn't been radio static between us. "Morning," I replied, without looking up. She sat across from me and gave it a beat before dropping the bait. "So, I was thinking." She reached for a strawberry from the fruit bowl, chewing thoughtfully. "For my birthday this year, the girls and I want to do something different." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "Weekend trip. Palm Springs. Just a few days. Spa, cocktails, sunshine. Laura found this amazing resort. We've been dying to try it." I nodded slowly, setting the mug down. "When?" She smiled. "Next weekend. Short notice." Spontaneous, she corrected. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Who's going? She listed them off casually. Laura, Jasmine, Celine. Maybe Emily. Emily, I asked. Didn't she just have a baby last month? Rachel hesitated. Right. Okay, probably just the three of us then. I let silence fill the space between us. Then I asked, what's the name of the resort? Rachel blinked. What? The place you're staying. Name of the resort. She looked away briefly, pretending to finish her juice. Something Palms. Desert Palms? I gave a slow nod. You booked flights already? Laura handled all the booking. She said a bit too fast. I clicked the side of my mug. Mind showing me the itinerary? Just out of curiosity. That's when the irritation broke the surface. Thomas, what is this? She asked, setting her glass down harder than necessary. An interrogation again? No, I said calmly. It's a conversation. Between a husband and wife. About where his wife will be flying off to for 3 days. I've told you. It's just a girl's trip. Then what's the problem sharing the details? She stood up suddenly, walking over to the counter and grabbing her phone. You don't trust me. That's the problem. I trust you, I said. But I also pay attention. And last time you came home smelling like a man and blamed an air freshener. Rachel's hand froze mid-dial. Then, with forced composure, she tapped Laura's name and hit speaker. The ring lasted longer this time. Hey, Ratch, Laura answered. Her voice was higher than usual, tight. Thomas wants to know the name of the place we're staying in Palm Springs. There was a pause. Oh, yeah, Desert Palms. That's the one. Cute little spa resort. We booked it last night, remember? Rachel smiled thinly and looked at me like, satisfied. But I caught it. Laura's voice. Off rhythm. Off pitch. Rehearsed. That's good to know, I said into the speaker. You and Rachel must be excited. Laura hesitated again. Super excited. Thanks, Laura, I said before Rachel ended the call. She crossed her arms. Are you done now? Almost, I said, sipping my coffee again. So, just to be clear, you're flying to California with Laura and Jasmine, staying at Desert Palms, next Friday to Sunday, right? Right, she replied slowly. I gave her a nod. Great, I said with a faint smile. Just wanted to make sure I had the facts straight. She stood there, watching me. But she knew. I wasn't questioning her because I was unsure. I was documenting. I went back to reading nothing on my laptop, coffee growing cold beside me. And Rachel? She walked upstairs, her steps a little too quick, like she wanted distance. Not space. Distance. Like someone hiding something behind their back. And I wasn't about to look away. Friday morning, 9:12 a.m. Rachel's suitcase was by the front door, pristine and designer. Like everything else she insisted was necessary. She wore her oversized sunglasses, indoors, and pretended to be in a rush, kissing my cheek with the kind of affection reserved for strangers. I'll call you when we land, she said, voice smooth. I held the door open. Have fun. She paused, like she wanted to say something more, but instead, she gave a polite smile and pulled the handle on her suitcase. The taxi had been waiting. I watched her get in. I watched the car disappear down the street. And then, I grabbed my keys and went the other direction. 15 minutes later, I pulled up to Laura's house. Middle of the day, and every light was on. Strange, for someone supposed to be in another state. I rang the bell. Nothing. Then a shuffle. The door creaked open an inch, and there was Laura, hair frizzy, face bare, still in pajamas. Her eyes darted like a rabbit caught out in the open. Thomas, hey, she said, her smile delayed and weak. What's up? I tilted my head slightly. I thought you were in Palm Springs. She cleared her throat. Oh, no. I was supposed to go, but I woke up feeling off this morning. Nausea or something. I nodded slowly. So you stayed behind? Yeah. Her hand gripped the door frame like she didn't want me seeing past her. There was a pause. I smiled faintly. You mind if I use your bathroom? I was stuck in traffic for over an hour. Laura blinked. Yeah, sure. Quick though. It's a bit messy in here. I stepped inside. The living room looked untouched. No bags packed. No trace of anyone preparing to travel. And then it hit me again, same scent as that night. Strong. Artificial. That same sharp, musky smell, disguised as cleanliness, but underneath it, something else. Like it was trying too hard to cover something up. Down the hall. I asked. She nodded, watching me like a hawk. In the narrow hallway, the scent was stronger. Not from the restroom. It clung to the walls, the couch, the carpet. I didn't need to find anything physical. I already had enough. I washed my hands, dried them with a towel that was slightly damp already, and stepped back out. Laura stood in the middle of the living room, arms crossed tightly. "You okay?" she asked. I looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I'm fine." I walked toward the door. Just before I stepped out, I turned back slightly. "Tell Rachel I hope she enjoys her trip." Laura didn't answer. Outside, I sat in my car with the engine running. I didn't need a confrontation. I needed confirmation. And I got it. That scent, that face, that hesitation. Everything I needed to know just fit together like puzzle pieces, right in Laura's living room. Rachel wasn't in Palm Springs. And now? Now, I wasn't angry. I was patient. I drove off, the plan already forming in silence. I booked the cabin in silence. No anger, no adrenaline, just focus. A place 15 minutes outside Palm Springs, far enough from the tourists, close enough to watch. It was small, tucked against dry hills and trimmed with olive trees. Dust coated everything. Inside, a twin bed, a humming fridge, and a desk stained with old coffee rings. Perfect. The next morning, I shaved, dressed, and drove down to the Desert Palms Resort, the one she claimed she'd be staying at. The lot was full. The lobby smelled like citrus and overpriced serenity. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here for clarity. I found her by the pool. It took seconds. Rachel sat at the edge of a cabana, hair swept up, legs crossed over a lounge chair like she belonged to the cover of a travel brochure. Her drink had a tiny umbrella in it, and her smile was wide, too wide. Sitting beside her, lounging in swim trunks and sunglasses, was Matthew Harper, Laura's husband. I hadn't seen him in months. His hand rested lazily near her thigh. Not touching, not quite, but close enough. They leaned into each other, laughing. At what? I couldn't hear. But it didn't matter. It wasn't a conversation between two friends. It was intimacy, unapologetic, public, like they'd done this 100 times and forgotten to hide it. I stood behind a row of hedges, phone in hand, and began taking photos. I didn't zoom. I didn't adjust lighting. I didn't need perfection. I needed truth. Photo after photo, Rachel tilting her head toward him, his hand brushing her lower back as they walked toward the bar, her sliding her sunglasses down with a smirk only lovers share. By the third set, I didn't feel anything anymore. Not rage. Not grief. Just confirmation. Rachel hadn't lied to me. She'd built a whole alternate life. And she did it on the spine of someone else's trust, too. Laura's. The irony was vicious. Laura had covered for her, twice. Had answered the phone, backed her lies, played the part. And all along, Rachel was the one stealing what mattered most to her. Her husband. Her life. That evening, I sat at the small desk in my rental cabin, light flickering from a crooked lamp. I printed the photos and laid them out flat beside a stack of pre-downloaded documents I had saved months ago, just in case. Divorce petition, Texas Form A. I filled in each blank with clean, deliberate strokes. No emotion, just detail. Name, Thomas Gaines. Respondent, Rachel Gaines. Grounds, adultery. Date of separation, effective immediately. I paused at one section, reason for dissolution. It left room for explanation. I didn't write much. Just this. She didn't just betray me. She betrayed the one person who believed in her the most. It was enough. I set the pen down and stared out the dusty window into the desert night. The wind howled softly through the hills, and inside that silence, I felt something settle in me. Not peace, but closure's first whisper. Rachel returned Sunday evening with that same breezy air she wore like perfume, light, casual, distant. The cab dropped her off just before sunset. I met her at the door with a smile I had no right to wear. "Hey," I said, voice smooth. "Welcome home, birthday girl." She blinked, surprised. "You're in a good mood." I laughed softly, stepping aside. "Thought I'd do something special. I planned a little belated birthday dinner for you. Just us and some friends. Laura included." That froze her for a half second, but she nodded, letting herself believe it. "That's sweet of you. Figured you deserved a little celebration, especially after such a relaxing weekend." She smiled thinly and rolled her suitcase in. The table was set by 6. Candles lit. The smell of lemon-roasted chicken and garlic bread filled the air. It wasn't fancy, but it was familiar. Our kind of dinner. The guests arrived one by one. Laura came in last, hugging Rachel, who tensed just enough for me to catch. "Missed you," Laura said, her voice warm, eyes tired. Rachel smiled. "You too." The small talk was polite, glasses clinked, laughter rose and fell in practiced waves. But underneath it, I could feel the cracks, hairline fractures growing wider by the minute. I barely spoke. I just watched. Watched Rachel overplay her ease. Watched Laura try to believe her best friend again. Watched everyone pretend they didn't notice the tension laced between words. Then came dessert. I brought out a cake, simple and homemade. Everyone clapped lightly. Rachel gave an exaggerated, "ah," and I leaned forward, setting a small envelope beside her plate. "What's this?" she asked, already wary. "Just one more surprise," I said, smiling. "Open it." She tore the flap and slid out the pages inside. The moment her eyes reached the heading, she froze. The room stilled like a windless night. "Thomas, what is this?" Her voice was already shaking. "Read it out loud," I said, voice soft but cutting. "Or I can." She glanced up, mouth parted, heart racing behind her eyes. Laura leaned in. "What's going on?" "It's divorce papers," I said calmly. "Happy birthday." The silence that followed was the kind that bends the air. Rachel stammered, "Thomas, this is insane. We just had dinner." We did," I interrupted. "And now I'm finished pretending." Laura's mouth fell open. "Wait, what?" Rachel turned to her, panicked. "I can explain. She's a good girl," Laura blurted out, her voice rising. "Thomas, come on, don't do this like some stunt. She made mistakes, sure, but Rachel's not cruel." I looked at her, and I said it clean, flat, and sharp. "Yeah, she's a good girl." Then I turned. "But only with your husband." Gasps. Audible ones. The kind you feel in your bones. Rachel's wine glass tipped as she stood too fast. "That's not what you think. Laura, it's not." Laura was already backing away, her hands trembling. "Matthew?" she asked softly, almost to herself. Rachel stepped forward. "Please, just let me." "Don't," Laura said, her voice now razor-edged. "Don't you say another word." The guests? Dead silent. Some looking away, others frozen, their forks mid-air. I stayed seated, slow sip of water in hand. Rachel dropped the envelope on the table like it burned her fingers. "I can explain," she whispered again, but it was too late. Laura was already at the door. One guest muttered, "We should go." And just like that, chairs scraped, shoes scuffed, and the house emptied itself like a sinking ship. Rachel turned to me. "Why would you do this in front of everyone?" I stood slowly, collecting plates. "Because that's exactly how you treated our marriage. Like a stage. So I gave you a final curtain." The door clicked shut for the last time, just after 10. Silence rushed in, thick and heavy, replacing every last echo of clinking glasses and gasps. The candles had burned low. Plates were still on the table, half-eaten cake untouched. Rachel stood in the middle of the dining room, her arms wrapped around herself like they could hold in the disaster. Her mouth opened a few times, but nothing came out. I didn't say a word. I walked past her, up the stairs, into our bedroom, the room we shared for 6 years, the room where she'd pretended. I pulled her suitcase from the back of the closet. Same one she used on her birthday trip. Same bright pink tag still attached. I laid it flat on the bed and began folding clothes, neatly, without emotion. Behind me, I heard the creak of the stairs. "Thomas," her voice was hoarse, hesitant. "Please don't do this." I opened her top drawer, pulled out the nightgowns she always packed, laid them in a row. "You have no idea what you've just done," she whispered. "You ambushed me. Humiliated me." I looked over my shoulder. "No," I said. "You did that. You just didn't think I'd say it out loud." Her arms dropped to her sides. She stepped into the room, mascara streaking down her cheeks now, like war paint melting in the rain. "I didn't cheat on purpose," she cried suddenly, voice cracking. "It didn't mean to happen. It was just, things got complicated, and I didn't know how to stop it." "You didn't try to," I replied, folding a blouse and zipping one side of the bag. "I was lonely, Thomas." Her voice rose now, frantic. "You always disappear into your work. You act like a ghost in your own life. And Matthew, he was just there? It wasn't some plan." I zipped the second compartment, clicked the handle shut. "So, Laura covered for you, while you were with her husband," I said plainly. "You lied to both of us. You want to talk about being lonely?" You made us both into fools. She staggered back a step, pressing a hand over her mouth. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and then she sank onto the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking. I still love you, she sobbed. You're the only one I ever really. I dialed the cab. Put it on speaker. Pick up address? The dispatcher asked. I gave it calmly. One suitcase. Passenger will be waiting. Rachel looked up, stunned. You're not even going to talk to me? I am talking, I said, picking up the suitcase. No, this isn't talking. This is shutting me out. Like you always do when something's hard. I stared at her for a long moment. I'm not shutting you out, I said quietly. I'm closing the door you walked through. Her mouth trembled. Thomas, please. We can fix this. Please don't do this. I walked downstairs, set her bag beside the front door. She followed slowly, barefoot, mascara still dripping. Her face was barely hers anymore. Red, raw, panicked. The kind of face that only shows up when control has completely vanished. I made a mistake, she said again, but this time softer, smaller. Can't we at least talk tomorrow? Let this settle? You want time, I said. But I gave you time. Weeks. Months. Years of it. You spent it all. A pair of headlights lit up the driveway. Her eyes widened. You already called it? 10 minutes ago. She covered her face, shoulders trembling. I opened the door. The driver stepped out. Evening, he said politely. I handed him the bag, and he loaded it in the trunk. Rachel stood at the doorway, staring out into the dark like she couldn't believe any of this was real. Where am I supposed to go? She asked quietly. Wherever you told them you were last weekend, I said. She blinked, like I'd slapped her without raising my hand. I'm not angry, I added. But I'm done. And I meant it. The last thing she saw was me holding the door open, not slamming it. Not yelling. Just ending it. She stepped out slowly, wiping her face with trembling hands. As the car pulled away, I closed the door behind her. No slam. Just a soft click. Like the final line of a story I no longer wanted to read. It was early, just past 8 a.m. The house was quiet, still carrying the weight of the night before. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the steam rising from the mug, like maybe it held answers I hadn't already found. Then came the knock. 3 soft raps. I already knew who it was. I opened the door and found Laura standing there. No makeup, hoodie zipped to her throat, hair pulled back in a trembling bun. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she hadn't slept. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if it was a good time. She just whispered, "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and she walked in slowly, like every step cost her something. She looked around the living room as if expecting Rachel to still be here. When she saw the empty space by the front door, her shoulders dropped a little. I offered her a seat, but she didn't sit. She just stood there in the middle of the room, wringing her hands together. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice was cracked and hollow. I need you to tell me, because I can't sleep until I know for sure." I didn't respond right away, just stared at her, feeling something twist inside me. "You defended her," I said finally. "You told me she was a good girl. You vouched for her without blinking." "I know," she whispered, eyes brimming. "I thought I was protecting her. I didn't know I was protecting this." Her voice broke on the last word. "I didn't want to believe it," she said. "Not after everything we've all been through." She looked me in the eye and told me there was nothing going on. Again and again. "Because she knew you'd believe her," I replied. Laura turned toward me. "Do you have proof?" I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the folder I'd set aside the night before. Inside, 8 photographs, time-stamped. The hotel receipt. A printed copy of Matthew's room service order. 2 entrees, 2 drinks, signed under his name. I handed her the folder. She hesitated, then took it. Laura flipped through the photos one by one. Her breath caught on the 3rd one. Rachel laughing, head tilted, Matthew's hand on her knee. Then again on the 6th, Rachel and Matthew walking toward an elevator, his hand pressed to the small of her back. By the time she reached the receipt, her hands were shaking. She closed the folder slowly and clutched it to her chest. "I thought she loved me," she whispered. "She was my sister. Since we were 15. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't sound cruel. After a long pause, she finally asked, "Why are you giving this to me?" I met her eyes. "Because truth should belong to the people who were lied to." She nodded, slowly. "Thank you," she whispered, then turned toward the door. But before she stepped out, she looked back. "She didn't just betray you. she said, voice barely there. She burned both of us, and she's going to lose everything for it. Then she walked out, clutching the truth to her chest like it was both weapon and wound. I closed the door behind her, and for once, the house didn't feel so heavy. Still here? Give this video a like, it really helps. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and paper. It was one of those older buildings, with high ceilings and flickering lights, like it had seen more endings than beginnings. I sat on the wooden bench outside courtroom B, hands folded, papers in a folder beside me. Clean shirt, clean shave. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because I wanted the outside of me to match how I finally felt inside. Still, resolved. Rachel was already inside when they called my name. She didn't look at me when I walked past, just kept her head down, hands clenched tightly in her lap. Her lawyer stood stiff beside her, young and overeager, flipping through pages like he could undo what was already carved in stone. Mr. Gaines, the judge began, eyes on me. Do you have anything you'd like to state before we proceed with the final ruling? I stood slowly, straightened my jacket, looked directly at Rachel, but not through her. I'm here to make it clear, I said, voice calm, that I'm no longer confused or bitter or angry. Just done. The judge nodded. And what are you seeking? I've asked for the house, I replied. No alimony. No assets divided. No shared accounts. Everything is already in my name. And I'm not contesting her personal property. There was a pause. Then she asked, and the reason for the dissolution of marriage? I looked at Rachel. Her eyes met mine for a split second before they darted away. Infidelity, I said, with the husband of her best friend. Ongoing. Repeated. Documented. Her lawyer started to speak, but Rachel shook her head, a small sob escaping as she put a hand over her mouth. The courtroom went quiet. She has nothing to say? The judge asked gently. Her lawyer whispered something. Rachel just shook her head again. Then it's settled, the judge said. Divorce is granted under the claim of adultery. Mr. Gaines retains full ownership of all jointly held property and will not pay support. This court is adjourned. Her gavel hit the block. That sound, 3 seconds of wood on wood, ended 6 years of marriage. Rachel stayed in her seat long after the courtroom emptied. Her face was pale, eyes red, mascara gone. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to grieve. I walked out and sat in the back row of the next courtroom. Same bench. New wreckage. Laura sat at the front, strong in posture, but still visibly shaking. Her lawyer, a woman maybe 10 years older, calm as ice, stood tall and spoke with slow, deliberate words. Numerous accounts of betrayal, Your Honor. My client's husband engaged in extramarital affairs, one of which involved the petitioner's closest friend, who she had once called a sister. I glanced at Matthew, seated 2 rows ahead. He wouldn't look back. Not once. His shoulders slumped, lips tight, hands folded like a child caught stealing. He was wearing the same dress shoes I'd seen in the poolside photo. They were scuffed now. Laura's voice cracked only once when the judge asked if she had anything to add. I didn't see it, she said, voice thin. I didn't want to. And now that I do, I want out. The gavel fell again. Second marriage ended. Second truth exposed. I watched as Laura stood. Taller somehow. Lighter. Matthew didn't follow her out. He stayed seated, staring forward like a man watching his life fade through bulletproof glass. I didn't speak to him. Not out of spite. Out of principle. Because some silences speak louder than any verdict. The courthouse doors swung shut behind us, and for the first time in weeks, the sky didn't feel like it was pressing down on my shoulders. I stepped out onto the sidewalk and inhaled deeply. Not because the air was fresh, it wasn't, but because it was free. Laura was a few steps behind me. She paused at the bottom of the steps, staring down at her phone like she didn't know what to do next. Then she looked up. I don't want to go home yet, she said quietly. Want to grab lunch or something? I blinked, surprised. You sure? She offered a faint smile. You were the only person in that room who knew what that felt like. Might as well eat with someone who gets it. So we walked. Not far, just a few blocks down to a quiet cafe I used to pass by but never entered. Brick walls, flower boxes in the windows, a little worn around the edges. We picked a table in the corner, near the window. 2 coffees, 2 orders of whatever the lunch special was. Neither of us asked much about it. Food wasn't the point. Conversation started slowly. Spoons stirring, forks scraping, cups clinking. But then, the silence cracked, gently. She looked at me like I was the enemy, Laura said, her gaze out the window. When I found out, as if I'd somehow betrayed her by knowing. She needed you blind, I replied, so she could keep feeling justified. Laura nodded, biting the inside of her cheek. Were there signs? She asked. I keep wondering if I missed something obvious. I shrugged. I don't think it was about signs. They weren't careless, just confident we'd never connect the dots. She gave a sad laugh. God, we were defending them. Me backing her. You keeping calm. It's like we were doing their work for them. We both went quiet again. This time, it felt different. Like grief sitting at the table with us, sipping from its own cup. Then Laura glanced over at me. Eyes softer now. You don't seem angry, she said. I admitted. Then I saw them together. And I realized, I don't need to carry rage. I just need to let it fall. She nodded, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. You always talk like that. I raised a brow. Like what? Measured. Calm. Like you're building your words before you hand them over. I smiled. I work in systems. I'm trained to build before I release. She laughed. Not forced. Not broken. Just real. It filled the space between us like warmth creeping into a cold room. And for the first time in a long while, I saw her, not Rachel's best friend. Not Matthew's wife. Just Laura. Clear-eyed. Wounded, but not weak. Kind. There was a sincerity in her that I'd overlooked for years. Maybe I hadn't needed it before. Maybe I wasn't ready to see it until everything else had burned down. She finished her coffee and leaned back in her chair, looking at me like she was thinking something through. Then she said it. I never thought it would be you sitting across from me like this. And yet, it doesn't feel wrong. I didn't answer right away, because she was right. It didn't feel wrong. It felt settled, like two people standing in the ashes of what used to be, trying to see if anything could grow again. I looked down at my empty cup, then back up at her. I didn't expect this either, I said. But I'm not uncomfortable. She smiled again. Me neither. We didn't make plans. We didn't flirt. There was no rush, no spark pretending to be fire. Just two people sitting at a cafe table, letting silence be something other than painful. And somehow, that was enough for now. The waitress had just refilled our coffees when the door slammed open behind us, loud enough to jolt heads around the cafe. And then came the voice. Are you serious right now, Laura? I didn't even have to turn. Rachel's voice had a pitch I hadn't heard before, half panic, half theater. She stood in the doorway, face flushed, hair messy like she hadn't bothered with mirrors. Her eyes bounced between the two of us like she'd walked in on some unspeakable crime. Laura froze, her fingers still wrapped around the warm ceramic of her cup. Rachel stormed over to our table, every step louder than necessary. This is what you do? She snapped at Laura. You wait 2 days, and then start creeping around with my husband? Laura blinked, stunned. Ex-husband. Rachel scoffed. Please. You really think this is normal? Sitting here like nothing happened. What? Do you two think you're some tragic love story now? I kept my voice steady. You don't even make sense anymore, Rachel. She turned to me, fury flickering. Oh, I make perfect sense. You've been dying for this. You think I don't see it now? I shook my head. No, you don't see anything. That's the problem. Laura finally stood, slow and deliberate. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. Rachel, this wasn't about you, she said softly. You ended things. We're here talking. That's it. If that feels threatening, maybe you should ask yourself why. Rachel looked at her like she didn't recognize her. Then back at me. I loved you, she spat. I made one mistake. No, I said quietly. You made choices. Over and over. You just never thought they'd come back around. For a second, I thought she might cry. But instead, she laughed, sharp and hollow. Wow, she muttered. You two deserve each other. And with that, she turned and stormed out, the bell above the door rattling violently behind her. Silence fell again. Laura sank slowly back into her chair, blinking hard. She's not well, she whispered. No, I said. But now she's not our problem. We sat for a moment longer, letting the quiet settle back in, letting the heat return to our coffee. It was like watching a storm leave the room and realizing the roof still held. The days moved differently after that. No more calls from Rachel. No long stares at my phone wondering what she was thinking. Whatever hold she had was gone, and in its place, a strange kind of quiet. A clean one. Laura and I saw each other from time to time. Coffee again, then lunch. Once, just a walk through the Sunday market downtown. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about breathing easier with someone who didn't ask for anything, just understanding. There were no declarations, no pretending, only honesty. "I don't know what comes next," she said once as we sat on a bench near a little duck pond. "But I'm not afraid of it anymore." "Me neither," I'd said. And I meant it. She told me things I never knew. That she always suspected something was off with Matthew, but buried it. That she saw how Rachel used her kindness as cover. And how ashamed she felt for defending someone who never earned it. I didn't judge her. I just listened. Because I'd done the same thing. One afternoon, weeks later, we found ourselves walking through Zilker Park, the sun soft through the branches. She had a cup of tea in hand. I had nothing, just my sleeves rolled up and my heart not feeling so heavy anymore. Laura nudged me with her shoulder gently and said, "You're a lot more talkative than I expected." I smiled. Guess I just needed the right kind of silence first. We didn't hold hands. We didn't need to. Two people. One path. No rush. Just healing, step by step. And somewhere in the middle of all that stillness, I realized something. Trust doesn't come back all at once. It walks. And that day, it was walking beside me. That was the end of my story. But there's one thing I still wonder about. When Laura showed up at my door, broken and betrayed, and asked for the proof, did she do the right thing in finally choosing truth over loyalty? I gave her everything, but was it too late, or exactly when it needed to happen? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, hit like, subscribe, and stick around, because there's more to come.